Hello and welcome back, and today I want to continue delving into the subject that's kind of been a real bugbear for me throughout 2023 regarding this middle ground that is slowly starting to appear between turnkey NAS solutions and full DIY. So many users these days, when they're looking at getting their own server, they're moving away from the cloud services, they're moving away from pre-made, slightly expensive network attached storage solutions and trying to find somewhere in the middle where they can get something convenient, they can get something affordable, and they can get something open source ready. And in a world where right now we have all kinds of turnkey hardware and software inclusive solutions which are arguably quite hard on the old wallet, particularly economic downturn, harsh stuff, and DIY solutions that you build from the ground up to save yourself a few bob. But with that, there's a lot of construction and time and energy. In the middle of all of that, we're seeing a lot of interesting solutions arrive, like this one. This is the Zimablade. This is a hackable single board server, and it's not the first time we've talked about this company here on the channel. Indeed, remember this? That's right, this is the Zimaboard. We talked about this back in March, April of this year, and this was their first crowd-funded single board hackable server. This device here allowed you, with its own inclusive Intel processor inside, inclusive memory as well, and internal storage for your OS, allowed you to attach SATA-based hard drives, attach multiple LAN connectors, USB, low-powered, we had display out, and on top of that, you had a PCIe upgrade slot there to add upgrade network cards, M2 NVMe cards, and more. And this thing blew me away because it was a ready-to-go solution that was insanely affordable and included the Casa OS software, that open source, easy-to-use software, as well as the option to chuck on Unraid, chuck on pfSense, chuck on OpenWRT platforms. It was incredibly adaptable and just left me super impressed. Which is why, when I heard that they were working on their second product at crowdfunding, this time over on Crowd Supply, this device here is a notable upgrade in so many ways. Icewhale's campaign over on Cloud Supply for this one, they were looking for a targeted 50 grand and they reached $59,000 there, and backers are going to start seeing this arriving on their doorstep right at the tail end of the year, but more than likely at the beginning of 2024. And we're already starting to see review devices already start to roll out, and that's what this is. This is from Icewhale, the Zimaboard. There are two versions out there, and there's lots of multifaceted ways that you can get hold of this. And right now, the earliest and lowest price you can get it for, and this is for the device with no memory and just the cable there, so that's the dual-core CPU and the cable included with it, it's $64, that entry point into there. Again, there's slight variations of whether you want the cable with it or not, or a different CPU or memory, but it's lowest price entry point at $64. If you go as high as $144, you get the unit, you get a SATA cage to put hard drives in, you get visual output cable, you get the SATA cable, you get 16 gig of memory that you drop on the table, and you get your USB-C adapter. All of that included, and it's still a quad-core system when you go for that. The dual-core and the Intel quad-core based system. A Celeron with 16 gig of memory at 144 Nika. What? It's for that kind of hackable server. If you were to try to get that in terms of hardware to stick inside that, or that 16 gig and a quad-core Celeron processor with a PCIe upgrade slot and 2 bays of storage, in that, you would spend 2 to 3 to 4 times this amount of money. So in this video, we're going to be reviewing this, we're going to be doing the software portion later on, and we're going to be taking a good old look at the hardware and the capabilities of this. But right now, I think it is incredibly important here at the top end to just look at how much we're getting for that $144 right now. So, because right now, in terms of value, tick. But for now, let's get all of those accessories off the table and get this device unboxed. Because right now, let's look at what the baseline product is. There's a retail packaging there, quite nice all the way around. They've sort of scaled things up. The previous unit arrived in quite a chic, kind of steampunky industry look there with the orange and the grey. This one's clearly gone a lot more cyberpunk in its appearance. I don't know if they're going to go for different aesthetics for each of their designs. If we get it opened up, we've got a message from the founder, Lauren, and the Zimablade team, just thanking you for your purchase. Again, not unusual with a lot of solutions, but I'll be straight with it. I might do the written review for this live at the same time of this video. It's a nice little card. It goes into a little bit more detail about the device, and there's even information on some of their follow-up products there with a 3D barcode down the back, something I'll be talking about in a few weeks. Information on first-time setup of the device. One thing I didn't touch on enough in the previous Zimablade video that I do think is mentioning here, the Casa OS that it includes is Docker-based, but it has the full GUI that you can access in the web browser. But more importantly, when you turn the device on for the first time, you don't need to KVM in. The device, once you set it up, it will set itself up, load the bootloader, and as soon as it's connected to the network, be findable on the network. You don't need to KVM and set it up for the first time in BIOS if you want to use the Casa OS software. It's ready to go, network accessible out the box, which is, once again, in terms of convenience, unparalleled. But there's our unit also inside the box. So we go to the bottom. We've got a USB Type-C cable, because again, this is USB Type-C powered. Again, brilliant news. On top of that, we've got stickers, which I don't care about, but I'm sure someone else does. And we've got that SATA connector. Now, you get one with the initial unit. So with that, you've got a 4-pin power and SATA data. So that means you attach this to that, and it allows you to have that additional power there. Again, look at the size difference between this, which by the way looks like the coolest retro tape player in the world, and the Johnsbow. Now of course the Johnsbow is a 5.6 base system, absolutely, but on this channel we built this system with an Intel Celeron quad core and 2.5 gig, and we ended up spending between $260 and $360 depending on extras for this device. The base level dual core of this, remember, started at $64. And this is a system that is good to go. So let's clear the table a little bit and start talking about the design of this thing. Now, the design of this, as I've mentioned, I absolutely love. I'm very much a kid of the 80s and 90s, and therefore anything that looks like a tape player is immediately going to appeal to me. But the design of this is actually a lot more nuanced than that. More on top of that, on top of it there, you've got the see-through panel, which is fine, and inside you can make out that single SODIMM slot that we'll talk about later on with the hardware. But with all of the ports nice strategically placed around the side with external storage ones on one side, and on the other one we've got the USB power there on the end, and we have got that visual output there, which you will need an adapter for if you want to take advantage of standard HDMI. You're going to need that adapter into mini display port there, and you've got the Ethernet there, which is 1 GBE. Unfortunately, you do have the USB 3 ports there, both of which are USB 3.2 Gen 1, so 5 gig, which I believe is a CPU limitation, but I'll be honest, I kind of hope to have seen better ports. And you've got the two SATA 6 gig ports there on the back with the power. And of course, you have got that PCIe, which I'm going to do a whole dedicated section on this video just to how much that blows me away. But more nuanced about the design here is the side panels here that go all the way around there. This whole side area comes off. That's a little black plastic fascia, but the base of the system and that ridged area at the back, this is a heat sink that works on the back there. So again, a dissipating metal panel there, get that near the mic, to help alleviate some of that heat on this silent device. That's right, this device has no fan. It is a silent single board server system there. That means that whether it is you're going to be utilizing this as a prosumer VPN router based network gateway, or you're going to be utilizing it as your own customized NAS server or a multimedia device, or you're going to be utilizing it for a surveillance platform. Any one of the myriad of open source software or container-based software that you can run within Casa or the third-party OS you want to run, you're not going to hear this in operation because of that design there. And also that modular expandable design means that if you do want to, for example, repurpose an old direct attached storage case, repurpose an old micro shuttle case, you can do it without using a traditional motherboard. You can just use this instead and scale up the ports as you need to. Now, the case itself measures so incredibly small, it's unreal. And if we get that plastic panel there off the top, we can take a little closer look at the available range of ports and connections and upgradable options inside. So focusing on that internal hardware, removing those 2 screws at the top, removes that plastic bay, and there we go. There is the full design there on the front. We've got that SODIMM slot there, which again, we can go ahead, get ourselves a memory module there like this one. Both CPUs, the dual and the quad core inside here, support up to a maximum 16 gig. If you go for different tiers on the available pricing structure, the base level model at 64 arrives with a dual core, but you have to provide your own memory. That's $64. If you go up to the $144 package, you get 16 gig of memory included, and there's an 8 gig there in the middle. But the layout of the individual components is absolutely spot on, with the CPU based underneath there, fully attached to the heatsink inside. Hopefully we do a much bigger rip down of this, which will be linked in the article in the description. But the CPUs in this, if you go for the 3760 model there, that is a dual core Intel Celeron processor, 2 core at 2.2 gigahertz max clock speed there. If you go for the quad core model, which is the 7700 model, so that's the quad core at maximum 2.4 gigahertz per core. That can be on maximum, so presumably it's less than that, 1817 again. Hopefully it's there on screen. Alongside that, you've got up to the 16 gig of memory, and the system has 32 gig of onboard storage for the OS. Now that arrives with the Casa OS, but of course you can choose to use a third-party OS and install that on there. Just bear in mind that you might overwrite the Casa OS. It's up to you. You use and hack this thing however you want. Now those CPUs have got integrated graphics, the dual and the quad core, which means you use as a Plex media server like Docker or VM, container deployment. Hell, put something like Proxmox on this and run whatever the hell you want. You can even run 2 different OSs booting from Proxmox on this because it's an x86 processor. It has the architecture to do so. There's a lot to play with there. But for now, when we talk about the hardware, the real thing I want to talk about is the scalability of those ports and connections on this, because that is something I can get behind so goddamn hard, it's unreal. Now, I said I'd come back to it, but that PCIe slot on this is what is, for me, one of the most appealing things about this. Don't get me wrong, having, network connectivity by default, only having 1 port rather than the 2 that was on the original Zimaboard is a bit of a pain in the bum, but it does support USB to 2.5 gig adapters. It's not the end of the world, and the fact that it is USB Type-C powered is going to be hugely appealing for lower imprint and low level consumption on this CPU, which by the way ranges between 6 TDP and 10 TDP depending on which one of the 2 revisions of CPU you go for. Indeed, having those SATA connectors there on the rear, depending on which version you go for, means that you'll either include that single adapter that allows you to attach 1 drive, or if you spend a little bit more, you get the dual port adapter. What this allows you to do is attach in on the rear here 1 SATA connector, the power connector, add the other SATA connector, and boom, congratulations, you've got yourself a 2-bay NAS. You can go ahead, grab yourself a SATA hard drive, slim that in there, and boom, what have you got? Why, you've got now a hackable 2-bay NAS drive here that allows you to just install those drives, simple as that, and use whatever custom case you want. Put this tiny little cassette player deck inside. But it's more than that, because once you really break down to the PCIe adapter slot on this, which by the way is Gen 2 times 4, which is a little disappointing, I will say. I know the available PCIe lanes afforded to something like this are going to be something a little bit more limited to those CPUs. I think it's a times 8 lane processor. But still, nonetheless, it would have been nice to have a little bit more to play with there, even if it meant they would have had to hamper some of the other things on this device. And I know they're trying to please everyone with this hackable board server, but it would have been nice to have the larger card slot for the extra speed. That said, as mentioned earlier, the slot is already pre-cut. There's no limit there. So if you do want to go for bigger cards, yes, you're going to be bottlenecked down to Gen 2 × 4, but you're not limited by the cards that you install there. But what sort of cards are we talking about? Well, let's say you want to build yourself your little NAS drive there, but you go, do you know what? I don't want just hard drives. I want NVMe. That's right. If you want to, you can go ahead. There you go. Now you've got NVMe slots on your new card there. What if you want some enhanced network ports? You know, that 1 GB is a bit dull, right? In that case, chuck in 10 GBE. Wallet, you've now got a 10 GBE server straight off the bat. Hell, get yourself a 4-port 2.5G server card. Boom, we've now got 4 LAN ports on our system, and again, maybe go for a smaller backplane there, but it still is doable. Is that the limit? Hell no. Hell, why go wide when you can go wireless? Go and do yourself a favour, slam in a Wi-Fi 6E card. Again, these things are getting increasingly affordable all the time, and the fact that you can adapt to choose what you want to do, it makes this a real open book in terms of expandability on this system, with or without a case, and just having it running there on the table. Hell, why not add an upgrade card like this one and give yourself 5 more drives of storage? Turn this little 2-bay into a 5-bay. And indeed, if you're going to utilise a DAS system, why not use some of those patch-ins there to use an existing 5-bay DAS enclosure and just pop this inside and really take advantage of the scalability of this and the customisation that it affords. Returning to storage, if you go for the $144 option, and indeed some of the cheaper ones, you get an HDD cage, which I know doesn't seem like much, but it means that if you did want to go ahead and install multiple hard drives into this system, sorry that's close to the mic, you can go ahead, have a cage for your storage drives, and then just go ahead, connect these cables to the back, and there you go. You've got yourself your 2-bay NAS, and you can put this inside anything. We are talking levels of customization, of deployment, and in the cases you choose, that could rival that of Raspberry Pi. And that's the thing. A lot of users are going to look at a device like this and think, well, isn't it just a Raspberry Pi? It isn't. This is, I would say, so many times better than a Pi, notwithstanding the fact that rather than relying on, you know, ever-evolving ARM processors, we've got ourselves an x86 integrated processor that opens the door to its capabilities in both OSs, Docker, and just individual multiple deployments in one substantially, and opens the door to hardware peripherals where the drivers can be very, very easily tweaked towards a multitude of third-party freemium or open source OSs on this device. And again, factor in that price. At the crowdfunding stage, it was $64 to $144. You could even go a bit higher and get cluster kits for a few hundred, which were made up of multiple nodes of this. For the home labber, and definitely the NAS enthusiasts, that is an absolute wet dream. But I think for now, we've talked non-stop about the hardware on this. I think we all know how I feel about that now. Let's get this device booted and take a look at the default Casa OS that this system arrives with. Okay, so we've got our device set up there. We've gone with a couple of drives, gone with an NVMe card, and we'll log in just a moment. But before we do that, let's get the camera nice and big here, because what I want you to see right now is just exactly what we're dealing with here. So as you can see, bringing the camera down here, what we've got is the 2 SATA hard drives here, a couple of Ultra Stars there inside the main cage. Alongside that, we've got them SATA connected, and we've connected an M2 NVMe card here with a Gen 4 SSD of verbatim, going directly into the system powered by USB power and going into that 1 GBE slot there. So a decent little setup here we're going for. Let's crack back in and minimize that there. But moving that down to the bottom, what you really came for this part for is, of course, the Casa OS. And I will say, when we did our review of the Zimaboard, we went into a lot more detail about this software and its capabilities and a number of the apps. We are going to be returning to this in a before you buy and doing some Plex testing on it, because I think a number of users want to know just how this is going to run on Plex Media Server. And if you are going to get one of these for yourself, you can go ahead and download the Windows or Mac client, which acts, if you're familiar with NAS platforms, as a kind of general assistant tool to set up network drives and find the device on your local area network. But let's go ahead and log into our NAS here. This is the OS. As you can see, incredibly responsive. I will say, when I was installing too many apps at once, it did lag a little bit there, but I wasn't too sure if a lot of that's to do with me over-saturating the network in terms of downloading a bunch of apps via that 1 gig, and how much of it was just the system really not doing too well with being hit by too many things at once. Again, we'll find more out on that when we delve a little bit deeper into Casa OS, because when I was looking at the applications that you can install via the App Center, one app I'm going to talk about very, very soon is PhotoPrism. And PhotoPrism is an alternative to a lot of the AI-powered photo recognition tools you can see on Turnkey NAS. We're going to be using the Blade here to test PhotoPrism in a lot more detail there. But coming out of it, we've got quite a lot of apps we can choose from there. You can even add multiple repositories if you choose, or just go for custom installations if you want to go for specific Docker images that you want to add into the system. Again, we can increase the scale of that there. Find out more information about the system in operation. You can go into the accounts there in the settings menu. Again, it's got the latest OS straight out of the box. Not a huge surprise. Change the search functionality there. All kind of standard stuff. And again, I'll probably mention more of this in my summary, but the Casa OS, it is responsive, it is intuitive, and it does allow container applications to be installed very, very easily, but it will feel like more of an entry-level OS, and you won't use it for the whole time you own the device. It'll help you get to grips with setting the device up for the first time before you graduate again towards your Unraid, your OpenWrt, your pfSense, or any of the third-party multimedia NAS OSs that you can go for there. As you can see, we've got the main storage drive, that 32 gig storage, the eMMC, but then on top of that we've got the 2 SATA hard drives there. We've got the original MMC module there, and of course now we've got our 1 TB SSD via NVMe via that card there. It's that straightforward. Bear in mind it is PCIe architecture, so pulling that card out, you can't hot swap cards, it doesn't work like that, but it's still nice for it to immediately recognize that card and our storage without any messing around with drivers there. Again, if you want to create additional storage areas there, if you want to create a new RAID port, as you can see, we can go ahead and create a new storage area. So let's go for that NVMe to make sure that's working, and we can go ahead and create our new storage area, but unfortunately it still has partitions, so we're going to have to format the drive, and then boom, we're able to turn that into some lovely storage for ourselves. It's that straightforward. LEDs are kicking off there on the board, and it's that easy to just add and bolt on new storage. Thanks to that support of merging storage, Casa also allows you to move the OS onto those bigger drives. I still would have preferred to see an M.2 bay on the actual system itself, even again limited to ×1. I would have liked to have seen that, but at least you can move it, or at least create parity with the OS. But again, Casa OS will always feel like a slightly entry-level OS. Overall, it's great, it's very responsive, and if you are someone that's going to deal with containers anyway, it does present a lovely graphical user interface to access via the web browser and play with those. And there's a lot of decent tools here, but still nonetheless I think a lot of users will go straight into a pure container OS, Portainer and the like, or just go straight into Unraid as well, something you can run from a USB on this device, and maybe something we'll test very, very soon. But again, widget settings there, changing what you can see, what you can't see, checking out some of the system stats. Again, hardware resources, it's very limited, but at least it gives you stuff to go with there. And that's really it. You're not going to be blown away. Even if you're going with the terminal backend access there to access things on a command line level, it's still going to feel a little bit limiting there compared with using some more graduated and more established OSs. Nevertheless, the fact that I've included this OS on this is still very, very good, and the fact that, you know, these hardware adapters we're including and installing on here are immediately picked up in a way that in a Raspberry Pi does require a little bit of tinkering with the drivers on GitHub. I would say with the network settings here, if we were to go ahead and install a brand new card, a network upgrade card, perhaps if we went for that multi-port card that we talked about earlier on, we'd have more to play with there. But it's when you delve into the App Center and use some of these applications in conjunction with it. Again, whether you're going to be utilizing this as a router point here and you want to go ahead and install things like Pi-hole to get rid of ads on everywhere, but obviously the videos I'm running because otherwise we don't get paid, lol. On top of that, you can use some of the AI-based stuff here in your own smart home, or go to the top and start integrating some of that ChatGPT logic here with some front-end GUI stuff here to enable this to be your own internet-connected private AI. There's still a lot you can play with here, whether it is for retro gaming, for personal backups or for business. But just bear in mind that the Casa OS is not quite as evolved as some of the other ones out there, and it will serve as a stepping stone more than anything else. At the very least, it does arrive with a file manager. I know that doesn't sound like much, but when you do look at a lot of kind of free or lower end open source OSs, one of the things you find is you can't access the storage on a breadcrumb file folder level via the web browser, and I'm pleased to say that it is supported here, right the way down to standard copy paste mentality, you know, thumbnail generation and more. They're all kind of built in here, and file drop does allow you to use other devices to quickly send data back and forth between the Casa OS powered NAS here and your own client devices with the supported apps, and using shared links that you can create within it. A lot of these links, by the way, you can also attach with your own security credentials, can all be enabled on there, but just bear in mind that you should really have a lot more of a highfalutin file manager for your data storage needs as your demand and back and forth transfers of data increase over time. Nevertheless, the fact that you can again attach your cloud-based storage, you can go ahead and attach other network storage devices on this rudimentary but still very capable file manager here is very, very desirable. And if you do want to utilize this simply as a standard Dropbox alternative, this will definitely do the trick for you. But just bear in mind, when it comes to more remote level access stuff, you are going to make your way back into that app center and use things like Tailscale and VPN tools, and ultimately creating those much more secure tunnels. But on a local level access level, and with certain tools available on your client devices there, again, using that client, that Windows client there, will allow you to create a lovely localized storage backup and synchronization environment very easily. In the end, it's very difficult to criticize the Casa OS simply because it is designed to be a very lightweight overlay for Docker and other container applications, and in the App Center they've already supplied access to pretty much all of the tools you're going to need for home or business. Could it be better? Maybe, if you're going to compare it against some fully fledged NAS OSs out there with turnkey, but those have been designed very much for a premium platform. And let's face it, Icewhale knows that the Zimablade, the Zimaboard and all of their systems they're going to be working on are going to be hackable. They're going to be used with third-party OSs quite a lot, either on the sly with multi-OS deployed within one single, for example, Proxmox setup, or as a singular OS. And they know that as much work as they'd like to do on this, people are buying these moddable systems for the hardware and to run their own chosen setups, registries, dockers, images and more. So there's only so much they have to give, and what you are getting in this OS, I would say, is a lot more than you would expect for this price tag. But let's summarize today's review, make our way back to the camera and decide just how much we like or dislike this device. So what do I think? Well, unsurprisingly, I chuffing love it. This is exactly the sort of solution there should be more of in the market. At the start of this video, I talked about how turnkey NAS solutions, as good as they are and as convenient as they are expensive, and they're not for everyone. And those that want to go DIY, that don't want to spend the extra money, it can be intimidating. All of those mixed warranties, all of the fact you've got to build it from scratch and cross your fingers, and everything to do with the casing to the PSU, everything about DIY, whether you go for open source software or freemium semi-paid like Unraid, has its hurdles. And right there in the middle is a system that is both convenient and cheap, something we don't hear enough of. What do I love? I like the design. I really like the design. I like the fact that it's managed to make it even smaller than the Zimaboard, but still maintained its own aesthetic charm. And this time, rather than steampunky industrial, they've gone for that cyberpunk. I like the case design. I'm surprised they don't offer alternate cases, if I'm honest. And the fact that you can get this for that bridge, where you can get it installed in that little case there, I think there is a hole in the market for them there if they want to go ahead and produce their own larger cases a la Raspberry Pi. The fact that it's silent during operation, absolute godsend. I love that about it, and I think there are not enough truly silent solutions on the market that need to balance temperature increases and system cooling against just general noise and being in close proximity, and this does a great job. When we had it running with the Casa OS section of the video, I was 1.5 feet away from it. I could never have done that with reviewing these and not have any noise. The Casa OS itself, I'm not going to say it's mind-blowing. It is, you know, fairly base level as a Docker front end. It is user-friendly. It does bring an element of user-friendly nature to the installation of those apps. And if anything, is not dissimilar to utilizing something like Ubuntu, which in itself, I believe, needs to be more accessible to most users on a hardware level, obviously not a software level. And the fact that it's powered over USB and the fact that you can adapt largely any card to this means that you have got a truly scalable, single board, hackable solution when right now everything feels a lot more complex. Is it perfect? No. Yes, to maintain that price point, they've had to clip its wings. And some of those things, these are going to sound like churlish complaints. But that CPU still feels underpowered in 2023. Not its core speed of the fact it's integrated graphics, I get that. But it's a Gen 2 CPU, which means there are less lanes, bandwidth to play with, I should say. The fact that it doesn't have scalable memory is a complaint I had about its predecessor. I like the fact that we can now upgrade the memory better, but the fact I can't put an M2 NVMe in this is something of a pain. Even if it had been something Billy Basic like mSATA, I would have been happy with that. On top of that, 1 gig by default feels like a bottleneck in 2023, especially when its predecessor had 2 Ethernet ports. Again, I get it, they're staying in the price point and you can get USB adapters as well as PCI adapters, but still nonetheless, 1 port for things like failover, SMB multi-channel link aggregation, you name it what you want, one way or another. It's a shame it's not present there. Also, as an upgrade over its predecessor, it's smaller, it's got a better CPU memory upgrade, but if you already own one of these, I'm not certain this is a sufficient enough upgrade. Yes, we are still talking very small sums of money, so maybe you can swallow that for your home lab, but if you are looking to upgrade and money is tight, I'm not sure there's enough as an upgrade to justify it for you. And of course, as mentioned, the Casa OS, it's still a light OS, and I think the Casa OS, as good as it is straight out the box, it's a stopgap, and it's what you're going to use until you put something you're ready to put on there. So it's nice that it's included, but it's by no means a deal breaker. But those small complaints aside that all can be put under the heading of, well, you've got to stay within that price point, you know, still do not disguise one of the best things I've reviewed on this channel for a long time. For DIY NAS users, for turnkey NAS users, for build it from the ground users, or simple simplicity NAS buyers, this is one of the best servers I've talked about on the channel for a long time, and you're going to be hearing me talking about this a lot more. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this. Hopefully the written review on this that I'll be updating regularly as we do follow-ups on this will be below, so do check that out. But apart from that, thank you so much for watching. Click like if you've enjoyed the video, subscribe to learn more. If you need free advice, use the Discord, the free advice section, the free community forum, or head over to Ko-Fi to use some of the free advice available and the tier and rewards on there to get access to these videos and free support and the monthly Zoom video all there. But apart from that, I will see you next time.